Most people live as if their inner state is owned by the outside world. When circumstances are favorable, they feel calm. When conditions become difficult, they feel disturbed. This creates an invisible dependency where peace, confidence, and stability are rented from situations instead of developed within. To understand that circumstances are external and the mind is internal is not a philosophical idea meant to sound wise. It is a practical distinction that determines whether you live as a master of yourself or as a servant to events. Circumstances are everything that happens outside your direct control. They include people's opinions, economic conditions, health challenges, weather, success, failure, praise, and criticism. These things arrive and leave on their own schedule. The mind, however, is the space where interpretation happens. Between an event and your emotional reaction, there is a moment, often unnoticed, where meaning is assigned. That moment belongs to you. When this moment is ignored, life feels overwhelming. When it is understood, life becomes manageable. A situation by itself has no emotional content. It is neutral. Meaning is added by thought. Losing a job can be interpreted as humiliation, injustice, or the end of security. It can also be interpreted as redirection, training, or an invitation to grow. The event is the same. The inner experience is completely different. This shows that the mind is not a passive receiver of reality, but an active participant in shaping experience. Many people confuse emotional reactions with truth. If they feel anxious, they assume something is wrong. If they feel angry, they assume someone has wronged them. But emotions are signals, not commands. They reflect habits of thinking built over time. When the mind has not been trained, it reacts automatically, pulling the inner state in the same direction as the circumstance. This is why small problems feel big and temporary discomfort feels permanent. Understanding the separation between circumstances and the mind creates space. Space allows choice. Instead of immediately reacting, you begin to observe. Observation weakens the grip of the situation. You notice sensations in the body, thoughts forming, emotions rising. This noticing alone already changes the relationship. The mind is no longer drowning in the event, it is witnessing it. Mastery begins with this witnessing. Not judging, not suppressing, not escaping, but seeing clearly. When the mind sees clearly, it recognizes that discomfort does not mean danger. Pressure does not mean failure. Uncertainty does not mean loss of control. These associations were learned, and what is learned can be unlearned. When people say, "This situation made me angry," they unknowingly surrender responsibility. Situations do not have hands, they cannot grab emotions. Anger arises because the mind interprets something as a threat to identity, expectation, or desire. Once this is seen, responsibility returns. Responsibility here is not blame, it is ownership. Ownership of the inner response restores power. A mind that depends on circumstances for stability will always be fragile. It must constantly protect itself, avoid discomfort, and seek reassurance. This creates exhaustion. In contrast, a mind that is trained to remain steady becomes resilient. It does not demand that life be easy. It adapts. It bends without breaking. This resilience is not emotional numbness, it is emotional maturity. Daily life offers endless opportunities to practice this separation. When someone speaks harshly, notice the immediate inner reaction. When plans fail, observe the disappointment without feeding it with stories. When things go well, notice attachment forming. In each moment, the practice is the same. Recognize the event as external and the response as internal. Over time, this practice changes the structure of the mind. Reactivity decreases, awareness increases. You stop identifying so strongly with thoughts and emotions. They become experiences you have, not identities you are. This shift is subtle but profound. It transforms how you move through challenges. The world does not need to be controlled when the mind is governed. Trying to control circumstances is endless and frustrating. Training the mind is direct and effective. The outside will always change. This is unavoidable. The inside can be trained to remain stable in change. This is where true security comes from. When you understand this separation deeply, fear loses much of its power. Fear relies on the belief that external events can destroy your inner state. Once you see that the inner state is shaped by awareness and interpretation, fear weakens. Confidence grows quietly, not because you believe nothing bad will happen, but because you trust your ability to meet whatever happens. Mastery is not about eliminating difficulty. It is about no longer being ruled by it. Circumstances will rise and fall. Praise will come and go. Success and failure will visit. But when the mind is trained, your center remains intact. This is freedom. Not freedom from life, but freedom within life. Human experience does not come directly from reality itself, but from how reality is interpreted. What you see, what you feel, and even what you suffer are not raw facts. They are filtered through perception. This filtering happens so quickly that most people never notice it. They assume that the world is simply the way it appears to them. In truth, the mind is constantly editing, labeling, comparing, and judging. This silent activity shapes the entire quality of life. Perception is formed through past experiences, habits of thought, fears, desires, and expectations. Two people can stand in the same place, hear the same words, and walk away with entirely different emotional experiences. One feels insulted, the other remains calm. One feels motivated, the other feels discouraged. The difference is not intelligence or strength. It is the lens through which the situation is viewed. This lens is usually unconscious, and whatever is unconscious controls us. Suffering increases when perception is narrow. A narrow perception takes events personally, exaggerates threats, and assumes permanence. A single failure becomes an identity. A temporary emotion becomes a prediction of the future. When perception is untrained, the mind treats every thought as truth and every feeling as a command. This is why people suffer not only from pain but from the stories built around pain. Training perception begins with slowing down the mind. Speed creates distortion. When reactions are immediate, perception is shallow. When attention is steady, perception becomes accurate. This does not require changing external conditions. It requires changing how closely you observe your inner responses. You begin to notice that thoughts arise automatically, often repeating old patterns. You also notice that these thoughts shape emotions before any conscious decision is made. Once this is seen, a gap appears. In that gap, you can question interpretation. You can ask whether a thought is useful, necessary, or simply habitual. This questioning weakens identification. Instead of saying, "This is happening to me," the mind starts to say, "This is how I am interpreting what is happening." This small shift restores clarity. Perception also determines whether life feels heavy or meaningful. Challenges can be perceived as punishment or as training. Waiting can be perceived as wasted time or as patience in practice. Silence can be perceived as emptiness or as space. Nothing in the situation changes, yet the experience is completely transformed. This shows that quality of life is not tied to comfort, but to understanding. An untrained perception constantly compares. It measures itself against others, against imagined standards, against expectations of how life should be. Comparison creates dissatisfaction, even in favorable conditions. A trained perception focuses on what is present and what is required now. It replaces comparison with engagement. When the mind is engaged with the present task, unnecessary suffering decreases. Emotionally, perception decides whether feelings are enemies or information. When sadness arises, an untrained perception resists it, fearing weakness. This resistance multiplies suffering. A trained perception observes sadness without labeling it as failure. It allows the emotion to move without turning it into a personal story. In this way, emotions pass instead of accumulating. Perception also shapes identity. When someone says, "I am an anxious person," they have mistaken a pattern of perception for a fixed self. Anxiety is a way of interpreting uncertainty, not a permanent trait. When perception is trained, identity becomes flexible. You are no longer defined by moods or reactions. This flexibility brings lightness. Daily life becomes the training ground. When something triggers irritation, Instead of focusing on the object of irritation, attention turns inward to the interpretation forming. When something goes wrong, instead of asking why it happened, you notice what meaning the mind assigns. This awareness gradually dissolves automatic suffering. Training perception does not mean forcing positivity. It means seeing clearly without distortion. Clear perception recognizes difficulty without drama and beauty without attachment. It allows you to meet life as it is, rather than as you fear or expect it to be. As perception refines, life feels less hostile. The world does not soften, but the inner resistance does. You begin to experience stability even when conditions are unstable. This is not indifference, it is understanding. When understanding deepens, suffering loses its unnecessary layers. In the end, changing perception is not about escaping reality but about meeting it honestly. When the filter becomes clear, experience becomes lighter. Life remains complex, but the mind no longer turns complexity into constant struggle. This is how training perception transforms life without changing conditions. A stable mind is not a gift given at birth, nor is it the result of favorable circumstances. It is trained. Just as the body becomes strong through consistent physical practice, the mind becomes stable through discipline applied over time. Without discipline, the mind follows comfort, avoids discomfort, and reacts impulsively. With discipline, the mind learns to remain steady even when pressure rises. This steadiness is the foundation of inner strength. Discipline is often misunderstood as harshness or restriction. In truth, discipline is structure that protects energy and directs attention. It creates a container in which the mind can develop. When there is no structure, attention scatters. Thoughts pull in many directions, emotions swing without restraint, and external events easily disturb inner balance. Discipline gathers this scattered energy and gives it direction. The mind naturally seeks what feels good and avoids what feels uncomfortable. This instinct is not wrong, but when it is left untrained, it weakens resilience. Every avoided discomfort becomes a future fear. Every indulgence strengthens dependence. Discipline gently reverses this process. By voluntarily doing what is difficult but necessary, the mind learns that discomfort is survivable. This lesson is transformative. Stability under pressure is not built in moments of ease, but in moments of resistance. Waking up on time, maintaining posture, keeping attention on the breath, completing tasks without distraction, these simple practices train the mind to stay present when it wants to escape. Each time the mind is brought back from distraction, it becomes a little stronger. This strength is quiet, but cumulative. Attention is the core of discipline. Where attention goes, energy flows. An undisciplined mind allows attention to be stolen by every stimulus. A disciplined mind chooses where attention rests. This choice is not always comfortable, especially at the beginning. The mind resists being guided. It wants freedom without responsibility. Discipline teaches that true freedom comes from control, not from indulgence. Repetition is what transforms discipline into stability. A single act of focus does little. Repeated acts reshape the mind. Neural patterns are reinforced through consistent behavior. Over time, what once required effort becomes natural. Calm becomes familiar. Focus becomes accessible. This is how discipline becomes embodied rather than forced. Under pressure, an undisciplined mind collapses. Thoughts race, emotions intensify, and clarity disappears. A disciplined mind still feels pressure, but it does not lose orientation. It remains connected to breath, posture, and awareness. This connection prevents overwhelm. Pressure becomes information instead of threat. Discipline also teaches emotional regulation. Instead of suppressing emotions or being controlled by them, the mind learns to contain them. Containment does not mean denial. It means allowing emotions to arise without immediately acting on them. This pause creates space for wiser action. In this space, stability grows. Many people wait for motivation to act. Discipline reverses this order. Action comes first, motivation follows. When the mind learns to act without needing the right mood, it becomes reliable. Reliability builds self-trust. Self-trust strengthens stability. This cycle is essential for inner power. Discipline must be consistent, but not extreme. Excessive force creates rebellion. Gentle firmness creates cooperation. The goal is not to dominate the mind, but to train it. Training respects limits while gradually expanding them. Progress is steady, not dramatic. A disciplined mind is not rigid, it is adaptable. Stability does not mean immobility, it means balance. When circumstances change, the mind adjusts without panic. When challenges arise, it responds without collapse. This adaptability is the sign of true strength. Over time, discipline reduces unnecessary suffering. The mind no longer amplifies stress through resistance or avoidance. It meets difficulty directly. This directness simplifies life. Energy once wasted on mental chaos becomes available for purposeful action. In the end, a powerful mind is built through daily choices. Each moment of discipline is a vote for stability. Each return to attention is an act of strength. Nothing dramatic is required. What is required is consistency. Through discipline, attention, and repetition, the mind becomes a place of steadiness rather than turbulence. And from this steadiness, clear action and inner freedom naturally arise. Many people unknowingly give away their inner power by placing responsibility outside themselves. They believe their emotional state, motivation, or peace depends on how others behave or how situations unfold. When life goes well, they feel strong. When it does not, they feel powerless. This way of living appears natural, but it quietly erodes inner strength. Responsibility is the act that reverses this loss. When responsibility is reclaimed, inner power returns. Responsibility does not mean blaming yourself for everything that happens. Events arise from many causes beyond personal control. Responsibility means recognizing where your control actually exists. You may not control circumstances, but you control how you meet them. You control the meaning you assign, the effort you give, and the action you choose next. When this distinction becomes clear, the mind stops feeling trapped. Blaming circumstances is tempting because it relieves immediate discomfort. If someone else is at fault, the inner conflict seems resolved. But this relief is temporary. Each act of blame strengthens the belief that power lies outside. Over time, this belief creates helplessness. The mind begins to wait instead of act, complain instead of adapt, and react instead of respond. Taking responsibility feels heavier at first. It removes excuses. It exposes habits, weaknesses, and avoidance. Yet within this weight is strength. Responsibility restores dignity. It says, I may not choose what happens, but I choose how I stand within it. This choice is the foundation of freedom. Responsibility begins with awareness of reaction. Before changing behavior, the mind must see how it currently responds. When anger arises, instead of justifying it, responsibility observes it. When fear appears, instead of fleeing, responsibility stays present. This observation interrupts automatic patterns. It shifts the mind from victimhood to authorship. Inner freedom does not come from controlling outcomes, but from mastering responses. When responses are unconscious, freedom is absent. The mind is pulled by habits and triggers. When responses are conscious, freedom emerges. Even in limitation, there is choice. Even in loss, there is direction. Responsibility also transforms suffering. Pain is often unavoidable. Suffering, however, is intensified by resistance, blame, and rumination. When responsibility is taken, energy moves from complaint to engagement. Instead of asking why something happened, the mind asks what is required now. This question is practical. It directs action. Strength grows when responsibility is practiced consistently. Each time you respond intentionally rather than reactively, the mind records capability. This record builds self-respect. Self-respect stabilizes emotions. Stability allows clearer decisions. Clear decisions lead to better outcomes. This cycle reinforces inner power. Responsibility also changes relationships. When you stop expecting others to manage your emotions, interactions become cleaner. Communication improves. Boundaries become clearer. You speak from ownership rather than accusation. This reduces conflict and increases respect. Taking responsibility does not mean suppressing feelings. Feelings still arise. Responsibility means allowing feelings without letting them dictate behavior. You feel anger but choose restraint. You feel fear but choose movement. This separation between feeling and action is maturity. The mind often resists responsibility because it fears pressure. In truth, responsibility reduces pressure. It simplifies life. Instead of fighting reality, the mind works with it. Energy once spent on blame becomes available for growth. Responsibility must be practiced in small daily moments. How you handle inconvenience, criticism, delay, and discomfort matters more than how you handle major events. These small acts accumulate. Over time, the mind becomes reliable. Reliability creates confidence. Confidence strengthens freedom. Inner power is quiet. It does not need control over others. It does not demand perfect conditions. It rests in the knowledge that whatever arises, you can meet it with awareness and intention. This power is stable because it is internal. When responsibility is fully embraced, life no longer feels like something that happens to you. It becomes something you participate in consciously. Even when circumstances are difficult, the mind remains upright. This uprightness is strength. This steadiness is freedom.